Yep.
Okay. Well, welcome, and we'll start off with our bracha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu v'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
All right, let's see what we can do today. Here's where we were. So we apparently read verse 14, and so, yeah, we'll just do one more time for good measure. So it says Zot HaTorah, right? This is the general law, the instruction. I mean, we've just been going through this whole process, complicated process and difficult process of preparing the ashes of the red heifer or the red cow. And now it's telling you, the Torah is coming to tell you, what are the circumstances? Zot HaTorah, this is the instruction. Adam ki yamut be'oil. If a person dies in a tent, and what we understand by that is that it is canopied, right? There's a roof over this person. Kol haba ela oil. Anyone who enters the tent, v'chol asher ba'oil, and anything that is in the tent. So anything that comes into the, I should say, anything that comes into the tent and anything that is in the tent, yitma shivat yamim, very high level of impurity, will be impure for 7 days, right? So Rashi points out, kol haba el, just to clarify, right? Anything that comes into the tent, but od shahamet b'tocho, as long as this applies if the corpse is still in the tent. So here we go, we've got some more complexities. V'chol kli patuach, and any open vessel, asher ein bo, gotta go across here. Asher ein bo tzamid patil alav, which does not have a sealed stopper on it, tamehu, will be impure. So the Aramaic translation is shia, which is sealing plaster or clay, right? I looked this up. This is Jastro, page 1565, right? Makaf alohi. So alohi means alav, on it. Makaf, in other words, it is stuck around the top, right? It's a bung. Let's go back to the Rashi here. V'chol kli patuach, and any open vessel. And in the Gemara in Chulin, it says, Bechli cheres hakatuv medaber, that scripture here is talking about a clay vessel. It's not talking about something made out of wood or metal or glass, although glass is an interesting situation, because on the one hand, glass is like earth, right? But on the other hand, you melt that earth to form the glass. So glass can take on qualities of and laws of earth, and it also can take on laws of metal. So it's a very special case. But here he's saying we're talking about kli cheres. That means pottery. She'ein mekabel tum'ah migabo. Okay, which it doesn't become impure from the outside. In other words, if something impure touches a vessel that's made out of clay, and there's a stopper in it, right? It's sealed off. The stuff that's inside does not become impure. So it doesn't become impure from the outside. We'll clarify that some more if necessary. Ella mitocho, but from the inside. In other words, if something impure is hanging inside in that internal cavity, this is my understanding, right? Then stuff that is in that cavity, I believe, even if it's not directly touching it, becomes impure. Lefichach, and for this reason, im ein magofet tzmidato, if it doesn't have a bung with a tight, tzmidato, tightly fitting lid, petula alav, which is twisted, in other words, attached, right? Closing it up, alav, on it, yafeh, nicely. In other words, this whole thing has to be attached to it, this stopper, bechibur, again, connected to it, attached, tamehu, is going to be impure. So because it's as if the airspace inside that tent has an impurity to it. For this reason, im yesh tzamid petil alav tahor, if there is a bung that is attached to it tightly, tahor, it is pure. Patil, so he takes the word patil, lashon mechubar, it refers to something that is attached. The lashon ivri in Hebrew, v'chein, and he says, similarly, we have examples in Genesis chapter 30, where Leah is saying, naftulei Elohim niftalti, right? So I believe it has to do with the mandrakes. I believe I'd have to go back and actually check it, but something of the divine, perhaps. Niftalti, I have achieved. Nitchabarti in achoti. Oh, sorry. So this is actually Rachel, that she's and possibly through her having a child. You see, you got to check up. You got to go back and look because of the context here. In other words, I have attached myself with my sister. Because remember, Leah was fertile and Rachel was barren. And she, of course, felt absolutely bereft on that account. So this is the basis of the tribe, the son by the name of Naphtali. But there's the word patil in it. So it's to become attached. I can be connected. So that's a clay vessel. V'chol asher yiga al pnei hasadeh. So now we now have a different context. And anything which he touches on the surface of the field. The halal refers to someone who has died through some accident or having been killed in warfare, etc. Cherev. So halal cherev is someone who's been killed by a sword, or v'meit, or one who has passed away, or be'etzem adam. So in other words, if he touched such a body or a corpse, or be'etzem adam, even a bone of a person, or b'kaver, or in a grave, yitma shivat yamim, he becomes impure for 7 days. So this is one reason why Kohanim don't go into a cemetery. So you can see this is a complicated and very serious kind of thing. Let's see if there's Rashi. Here we go. Right. Al pnei hasadeh, on the surface of the field. So again, in this tractate Chulin, there must be some discussion about this. And he says, Rabotenu, our sages, Darshu, they expounded that statement, Lerabot, to include Golel Vedofek. So a Golel is something that is round, can be rolled, and Dofak has to do with it's right here, I have it as the frame supporting the movable stone of a tomb. So I went to Google to look up Golel Vadofek, And let me see if I can find it for you. Let's see what I can find here. So these here, okay, I'm going to see if I can make this larger here. So here they translate golel literally as a scroll, okay, but that's not, it means something that's right. Let me see if I can enlarge this. Can you see it enlarged now? I can't hear anybody. So someone say yes if you can. Just come off of mute for a second. Can you see the picture?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
yes,
thank
sir.
you.
We can.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Yeah.
Okay.
He can't see us is the problem when he's on the screen share.
That's right. So here is the golel. Do you see this roll here? This stone here? That's the stone that rolls across there to close the mouth. So that would be a golel. That would make sense. And let me see if I can find a. So as I said, I wanted to look this, I think, of course. Now it is a coffin, but Rashi considers this to be the golel v'dofek, right? So he considers a coffin a golel. This is what it's saying here. Let me go to another picture. See here, there's that other one. This is different though. This is a rolling stone that they used to protect the synagogue, I believe. See this? They have these antiquities. Let's see. I guess it's going to be large. Well, I guess that's about as enlarged as it can be. So it could be. So some let me take this off. Let's go back in here. But it's clearly talking about some arrangement regarding a cemetery where their bodies, right? So he says upshuto, and the simple meaning al pnei hasadeh, on the surface of the field, she'ein sham ohel. We're talking about a situation where there is no canopy, and that's why it's talking about the open field. That's how we could best translate this. Metameh hamet sham b'negi'ah. There, the corpse renders one impure by direct touching. So just to review a little bit, right? So what the Torah is teaching us here is that in a situation where there's a body in a canopied situation, that where it's in a room, for example, that has some kind of roof overhead, and as long as the body is in the room, a person who's in the room already or a person who goes into the room becomes impure for 7 days. And of course, is going to require the ashes to be sprinkled on him or her on the 3rd and 7th day. And likewise, any vessel that is made out of, we had that special law regarding a clay vessel. But not only that, in a case where the body is in the open field or even part of a body, bone, etc., if someone touches it, they become also impure on this kind of level. There's also, I'm trying to think of a term. There was also a situation where there might have been someone buried in a field and they plowed the field, which meant you couldn't identify where this person was buried. By the way, of course, now we have a reason for demarcations in a cemetery so that you know exactly where a person is buried. Because in this particular field, it created all kinds of halachic problems because you didn't know where the person was buried. And also, if the field had been plowed, the body could have been spread out, parts of it. And the Torah is saying that even part of a body is rendering you this kind of impurity. So just to give you a little bit of a sense of some of the issues that come out of this. So let's keep going. V'lakhu latame, and they shall take for the one who's become impure, may afar sreifat chatat. They should take from the ashes of the burning of the chatat, right? Obviously they're talking about the para adama, which is to render one clean, something that's to be for cleansing. And let's keep going. The Natan alav mayim chayim al keli, and they should place on some of these ashes, I believe, mayim chayim, fresh water, el keli, in a vessel. So they're going to put some ashes in this vessel. They're going to put some fresh water in this vessel, and we'll keep going in a moment. Let's just make sure we're covering all the Rashis. I'm not seeing any Rashi here. No, just continuing here. Let me just, since we've gotten to here, let me just check the chats. All right, okay. Not going to react. Okay. Velakach ezov, he should take hyssop, type of plant, right? The taval b'mayim, and ish tahor. A person who is impure, a pure man, should dip in the water this hyssop, the hiza al ha'ohel, and he should sprinkle on the tent, the al kol ha'kelim, and on all the vessels, the al ha'nefashot, and all the souls, and on the souls, asher hayusham, which had been there. So the tent itself requires cleansing. Anything that was in the tent requires cleansing. And of course, the people who were in there require cleansing. The al hanogeh, and in the other case where we're not talking about a tent anymore, we're talking about the open field, and the one who touched or that touched the etzem, a bone, or the halal, or the person who was killed, or v'meit, or someone who died naturally, or v'kaver, or the grave, which of course we're talking about, that contained the person.
Can I say something?
Of course, please.
Thank you. It just brought to mind how the survival of our people has been so much based on Torah, with the hand washing, with all of these details about things. And even though there wasn't a science back then, there was an inherent knowing, even if it went beyond what people would think would be necessary. But there was an inherent knowing that there were what people were putting in the chat, germs. And it really does apply right now, because I see, with the tent, with the indoors, the COVID being able to be transmitted more easily than outdoors. And somehow the people through that time had the sense of protection. And, maybe that's God appearing in these laws.
I appreciate what you're saying. My honest sense that, while what you say is true and applicable, that the issue is actually one of trying to deal with the nature of death, and and recognizing the spiritual, psychological elements that death presents us as mortal human beings. And by having this particular, how can I put it? I don't want to call it a ritual necessarily, because I think that takes away from the profound nature of this. But by having these sorts of ways in which to physically deal with it, and yet, of course, you don't necessarily see Tumah, right? Tumah is a completely emotional, spiritual state. But the recognition that those things have to be dealt with. Now, when we're talking about germ and germ theory and bacteria and stuff like that, we're talking about physical things. And it may be, the point that you're making may well be a natural outcome. But I think what's prompting this, and a fortunate outcome on one level, because of course, I think I mentioned perhaps yesterday, or maybe, no, it might have been in a different class, I think it was, that, during the time of the Black Death, right, Jews weren't dying at the same time. And the population looked at the Jews, thought they were poisoning the wells, and that they weren't dying. And so consequently, they were killing Jews.
Right.
So because they felt that
yeah.
the reason the Jews weren't dying must be for some reason like that.
Did you know that ashes are used in soap making?
Go on.
Ashes are used in soap making.
Because they're able to, there's the rubbing effect of them?
I don't know, but they're used to make
possible?
lye soap. It dawned on me, and I just looked it up. I don't know, but they use it. It's got to be hardwoods, but it's
It's not animal ashes.
Not animal ash.
Essentially, there's some wood in this too. Remember, there's cedar and hyssop and also some cloth. I'm wondering to myself whether there's some deeper symbolism, and symbolism affects us so much to this day. It's unbelievable, and in sort of ways that we are not conscious. It operates on the subconscious level, but thinking about the fact that these ashes contain animal parts, vegetable parts, and also this cloth, right? From this, we thought it might be silk, something like that, the crimson yarns, and whether or not in some ways it represents, I'm totally going on a limb here, the human being, the physical elements of the human being, and the fact that we are all, we're mostly water, right? What are we, sort of like 80 to 90% water? And if they removed all the water within us, we'd be nothing. The actual solid elements that go into the human being are nothing, almost nothing. So I don't know, just playing around with some ideas, because this is quite a description we're reading here. Let's keep, we've only got about a minute.
I was just going to add that I think I agree with Lisa's point about the parallels between then and now. And I think for me, the word that brings them together is the idea of purity. We're talking about purity of one kind and purity of another kind, but it's all about purity.
Yeah.
So I see.
And cleanliness is next to godliness.
But we need to be aware, honestly. I think it's important to make the distinction between physical purity, because certainly the Gemara discusses issues of physical purity, but there's also the issue of spiritual purity, and that's something harder for us to wrap our head around. I'm sorry, go on.
Sorry, it's a very physical process. You take a calf, you slaughter it, you burn it. It's all physical.
Yes, but there's also the symbolism involved of this. And that's because we naturally tend to go towards things that we can touch and feel. But the truth is, we also know that those very things can have severe or deep emotional implications, which would be moving the level of the spirit. Okay.
Of course.
So Jocelyn
I think the same thing is true when people are trying to stay away from disease.
Yes. Yes. Oh, yeah. And look at the emotional effects it has on us. So I think that's part of really not compartmentalizing overly much, recognizing that there's a lot of synthesis in terms of how our lives operate and how our emotions play into the physical side of us. As far as this purification is concerned, there's a question, and that is that after the 7 days, if they've gone through this process, they would be considered pure. Okay. I'll take we're almost out of time. Maybe I should just stop here. I think I will, I guess. And let me just put the little marker here. And we'll be here tomorrow, God willing. Oh, sorry. There we are. Okay.
All I'm saying is Ivory soap,
I was also
99
thinking,
and
yes.
40 whatever percent pure.
Well, I'm also thinking of bone china.
Mhm.
I'm thinking of how, it support, the idea of purity and maintaining oneself pure, and an awareness of when people become unpure is a way of also reinforcing our individual value
Oh,
as
yeah.
participants in the community, and how it's important for us to watch ourselves, basically,
Or to
maintain.
try, sorry, or to keep ourselves pure. Listen, my sense is this, and correct me if you think I'm wrong, but very often if a woman is raped, she feels dirty.
Yes.
She feels that she is impure. And I mean, that's a very, significant level of application of what we're talking about here. Okay. Is there some actual physical filth involved? Well, we could say there is, right? But it's more the act itself and the fact that she feels that she's been invaded, right? If I mean, there's probably a better word than that, but
Defiled.
Yeah, well, that's the impurity part.
Well, she feels defiled.
Well, that's what that means, right? Defiled means essentially that's a word you use for something that has become impure.
Right.
So there's something about our identity as human beings, and that they were conscious of back then. They didn't sort of deny it or run away from it, okay? But they wanted to deal with it head on. That, there's that wonderful prayer that we say at the very beginning. It's one of the prayers you say in the beginning of the morning, Elohai neshama shenatata bi torahi. God, the soul you gave me is pure. And it talks about Mishamra Bekirbi, etc., and how we're sort of given a responsibility to keep this precious soul that God has given, this pure soul, to keep it pure. But sometimes you can't. In fact, probably you never can do a total job of it. But then on the other hand, you've got the dynamic of how do you work this through? And it's part of growth and experience and stuff like that, and gaining a deeper understanding of what it is to be a human being. I wonder to myself, how much do people really ask themselves, what's my essence as a human being now? Do I appreciate really the complexity and the marvelousness of this? Of being conscious of the world in which I live, the functions, my body's ability to function, my sometimes also the dysfunctionalities. So I think it's in a way tied together so that we have a deeper and a clearer sense of just how amazing life really is, on a whole bunch of other levels that we don't necessarily talk about.
Mhm.
So I'm going to stop the recording.